It's not too far away, right?
Nope, no.
You can hear good?
I hope so. I think so. I mean, I can hear you. I think it's picking it up.
Okay.
Should be.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me know when you're ready.
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this press conference. We are standing here today to voice not only the concern that we have over a loved community member, but also the injustice that is being done in the case of Elena Martinez. We began this case because Elena is now facing eviction and homelessness because, as you know, it is almost impossible to find housing, particularly affordable housing in the city of Sarasota. So let's begin by going over the timeline of what has transpired till now. And for that, we have with us Carla Correa with the St. Pete Tenants Union.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Carla Correa. I'm here on behalf of the St. Petersburg Tenants Union. Our organization is dedicated to fighting for housing as a guaranteed human right, fighting against evictions, rent increases, and landlord negligence, which we saw a lot of in this case. We are here today, as Ruth said, to demand justice for Elena Martinez and her 3 children, and to demand that her landlord, Richard Ellis, who is also a codes enforcement special magistrate for the city of Sarasota, be removed from his position. Negligence was displayed by Mr. Ellis and his management in maintaining the unit, from plumbing issues that caused feces to come out of the bathtub, to raccoons banging against their ceiling, to eventually mold that landed Elena's 12-year-old son in the ICU. The plumbing issues are documented to have begun in October of last year and to have gotten progressively worse. In February of this year, like I said, feces came out of their bathtub and sink. That's a disgrace. A former tenant confirmed to us that this has been a previous issue for them as well. And because of this, Elena and her 3 sons were forced to stay in a hotel, which Mr. Ellis was reluctantly keyword, made to pay for. After this, the intimidation ensued. On March 8th, Elena was served with a 7-day notice of lease violation for very minor so-called infractions. One being a vehicle without a title that had no flat tires, did not prevent any traffic, and was operable. And another being a pet that she had already previously communicated that she had given away to a family member. But Mr. Ellis was worried about the wrong animals, because last month, more negligence on the part of Mr. Ellis became intolerable, with a family of raccoons banging their paws against the ceiling from the attic, scaring Elena and her children. The infestation had been ongoing, with the previous tenant also confirming that this had been an issue while they lived there as well. Last month was the month that Elena reported the mold. After that, she was slapped with a $1,000 rent increase. Just 2 weeks later, the first day of June, a mold report was done, but Elena has still yet to receive a copy of it to this day. On June 7th, she was given a notice of lease termination. On the 9th of June, at 11:03 a.m., I reached out to Mr. Ellis via email on behalf of the Tenants Union about the issues, demanding that Elena be put up in a hotel while the necessary repairs to the unit were made, and that she continue her month-to-month tenancy at the same rate that she has been paying. That same evening, someone claiming to be from the city showed up stating that they received a complaint about trash cans. And funnily enough, the department that enforces trash cans is the Codes Enforcement Department, where Mr. Ellis is also a special magistrate and has been for the past 20 years. It makes us wonder if he is using the power of his office to further retaliate against Elena. Mr. Ellis is not fit to be a special magistrate for codes when he is a slumlord, first of all. It is a clear conflict of interest, and he must be removed immediately. Frankly, his ethics as a lawyer should be called into question in general. On June 13th, I received a letter from Mr. Ellis's attorney threatening a lawsuit against me for defaming him by calling his behavior negligent and retaliatory. But based on everything you've heard today and will hear today, what could this behavior possibly be characterized if not those things? No family, no tenant should be going through what Elena and her kids are going through right now. Tenants in Sarasota need help. The federal emergency rental assistance funds are drying. Rents are continuing to skyrocket due to profit-hungry corporate landlords like Mr. Ellis. And more workers are slipping even deeper into poverty and homelessness, and will continue to unless action is taken. Some steps that the city of Sarasota could take immediately to address some of these issues are: number one, declare a housing state of emergency and allow for the residents of Sarasota to vote on rent control. No one should face a $1,000 rent increase. Something else, universal right to counsel for any tenant facing eviction. Over 95% of landlords are represented in eviction cases, while less than 1% of tenants are. And tenants deserve a fair chance at fighting this. Another thing, establishing an office of tenant advocacy to inform tenants of their rights and advocate for them in times like this. Richard Ellis, you have the choice to actually prioritize human lives before your bottom line, and that is what we are demanding from you today. Put Elena and her family in a hotel while the necessary repairs are made, and rescind the notice of lease termination and rent increases. Our lives are not disposable. Our lives, Elena's life and her son's life, their right to housing supersedes your hunger for profit. Thank you.
Wow, that was so powerful. Thank you so much for those words, Carla, and for reminding the people of Sarasota that yes, our lives and Elena's lives and the lives of her sons are worth way more than any profit. Right now, you can go ahead. Oh, you're gonna stay? Okay, perfect. Right now we're gonna hear from Elena herself, and it's important that we keep in mind the seriousness of this situation. What it really means to face homelessness, to find yourself needing to live where you are for reasons not of your own, for the negligence of Mr. Ellis, knowing that there was mold in that house prior to Elena moving in and failing to address that. So we want to hear from Elena. Come on in.
Hello. I'm Elena Martinez. I am the mother of my 3 boys that have been alive. No. And
Yeah, you gotta speak up.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Hello. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
There you go.
So I'm the mother. I'm Elena Martinez. I have 3 children, ages 15, 12, and 4. My children and I have been subjected to living environments that are less than livable. Unfortunately, because the housing is so bad here in Sarasota, we had to accept something that we would not have usually accepted, a house with so many, issues. I was confident in the ability of them to, fix any issue that was going on. But I realized quickly when my son landed in the ICU that it was more so about their profit than the person, than the people that it was affecting. During those days that my son was in the ICU, my constant thought was, I could lose my son. I watched my son lay in the ICU and his oxygen stat to 70 and 80 and continuing to drop even on oxygen. And I watched my family struggle and stress during that time frame, and us try to figure out what we could do to try to help him. I went home and I deep cleaned our home, and upon deep cleaning our home and pulling down my son's stars and galaxy off the ceiling, I noticed that there was black mold right above his bed. I sent those pictures into the office, and they sent a staff member over, and they told me that that was dirt. They tried to brush it off, in spite of my son being in the ICU with pneumonia and struggling to breathe for several days. He was unable to eat for several days. This isn't just my story. This is a story that can affect not just me, but everyone. There are many people that are like me that are scared to speak up because of the position that their landlords might hold, and in my case, a magistrate. But I'm not afraid. I have to stand up for my children. It's my job and my duty as their mother to stand up for us and our family at all costs, including homelessness. We have searched high and low and continue to search to find a home that is suitable for us, that will be healthy, where my children will be able to grow and be in a safe environment. We're still struggling to find that. And in the meantime of our search, we're still having to live in this condition with no one offering any type of help, although Mr. Ellis and his management has caused this issue and was well aware of it. This was not their first time learning about these issues. They knew of these issues before me moving into it, because they stressed the fact that there was new paint in the house when I moved in, as though that was a bonus. There's new paint in the home, but they failed to mention the mold that was underneath the paint, of how it would affect not just me and even visitors that come to my house. My son's mentor reported to me that he noticed that he started to have a wheeze in April after coming to our house. He actually thought that he had COVID, and he did not. Never had any breathing issues ever until coming to my house. We were in the house before all of this came out, but because of my working and trying to find financial freedom from Section 8 and being able to sustain a livable wage, I worked a lot. So we weren't there to know that this was going on. My children were gone a lot. I was gone a lot. But as soon as we started to live in our home is when everything unfolded. This is unfair to us. It's unfair to my children. The stress that we've endured, the many sleepless nights that we've endured. Something must be done, and I need the help of the community to step forward, to not be afraid to speak out on moments like this. So when these things come forward and these happen, we can come together as one and figure out how we can make and hold people accountable for mistreating us. A saying comes to my mind that we say often when we're at protests. We always say people over profit. People over profit, and that's what it has to be in Sarasota. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena, for sharing with us, this heartbreaking story, and about the things that you have suffered all throughout. So we know that the housing crisis that's taking place right now, it's not particular to Sarasota. It's also particular to the entire Tampa Bay area. And this includes sheriff deputies who are targeting people and police officers who come and try to conduct illegal eviction. But the housing crisis is not affecting everyone. We know that in particular, it affects women and black and brown people more disproportionately than everyone else and the rest of the population. And we have a very vivid example of that right here in San Pete. It happened regarding Jamie, who's standing here with us today. So I want us to hear the story of how sheriff deputies showed up to her house to conduct an illegal eviction, completely illegal eviction, thinking that they were right, and how the St. Pete Tenants Union was able to help Janie stay in her house. Come on in, Janie.
So, housing is a human right, and
Make sure to speak loud into the mic, close to your face as well.
okay.
Close to your face.
So, housing is a human right. It's really devastating what Richard Ellis is trying to do to Elena and her family. What happened to me was definitely a shock. The house that I've been living in for almost 3 years, my landlord, it became foreclosed, and a flipping company bought the house. So first we were given a 24-hour notice to leave the house with no prior notice, and we did not know what to do. We almost went into panic mode. My landlord told us to go to the clerk of court. We went to the clerk of court. The clerk of court was packed. People all over the city are facing evictions. When we went to the clerk of court, we were told that the only way that we could go through with this was with a lawyer. So that right there is a huge stumbling block for just poor people around the community. Me and my roommates are waitresses and bartenders, and we spend all of our time working for our city. And literally, you know, no one was able to help us. I was given a list of lawyers, and we called. It was Memorial Day weekend, so no one is able to help you. The lawyers don't answer, but you have this 24-hour notice. So luckily, with the St. Pete Tenants Union, we were able to access a lawyer that filed an emergency, some paperwork for us that day. And Tuesday morning, even though we were told if things are in motion, we would be okay, police officers showed up to our door and told us we had 15 minutes to leave. Now, one thing about the police officers is they don't know the law. We're telling them, we have things taped to our window talking about the exact motions that were filed, the exact things that were taking place, and how we had rights. Nobody cared, because it's always profits over people. The police did not show up and have any care for me and my roommates who were being wrongly evicted. They had all the care for this flipping company. And this flipping company isn't like a couple that's moving into the house that needs a place to stay. They are honestly evil, vile people. They showed up in our yard laughing at us. One of the flippers went into our backyard to jump on our trampoline. These people are just mocking us like it's funny. We found their social medias. They talk about pretending to beat evictees. They're completely ruthless. They don't care. You could cry in front of them. They just start laughing. And they don't even need the house. They just want to make a profit. So that is what's really sad, because people are really facing homelessness. And no matter how much you tell them, hey, this is the law, we can read you the law, this is what the law states, we have a lawyer trying to help us, they weren't hearing it. We called the lawyer. Luckily, the lawyer was able to get an emergency hearing, and the judge granted us our 90 days. But in the midst of all that, we had to throw all of our stuff out on the street. And it's completely traumatizing, and people shouldn't have to be going through this. And then number two, even given the 90 days, we still have to pay the new owners, the flipping company, rent while we're trying to save up for a new place in an unaffordable housing crisis. So it's almost impossible, because you're paying rent at the same time that you're trying to save up. You have to have at least $4,000 to $5,000 to move. People act like it's easy, but a lot of places, they want a deposit. They want your first and last month's rent. And this can be thousands of dollars, getting electricity and everything instated. Who can afford it? And people like to act like, oh my goodness, this is such a crazy story, but it's really not. Almost every single one of my friends that I talk to has gotten multiple $100 rent increases. More than not. I don't really know anybody's rent that hasn't gotten raised in the last few months, or anybody that's looking to renew. It's getting raised hundreds of dollars. One of my friends, it's $400 raised, and if she doesn't want to pay $400, then it's going up $600 to do a month-to-month lease. Who can afford that? And then my other friend, her rent's getting raised $500. Who can afford that? Nobody can afford that. And the thing is, these landlords, like someone mentioned before, they always have legal backing. So my landlord has had a lawyer. Did he ever once offer me any sort of protection or help? No, he told me to go to the clerk of court. When I told him that didn't work, he told me to call 211 for homeless housing. These landlords do not care about you. They don't care about you at all, and they have legal backing. But 9 times out of 10, I would even go as far as 10 times out of 10, the tenants that they're abusing, mistreating, and doing illegal things to, they don't have any legal backing. And it's very hard to find. And the people that are doing any affordable or government legal backing, they're way overbooked. Because, like I said, everybody's struggling. The clerk of court was packed. I even recognized somebody in the clerk of court, which hits home because everybody's facing evictions in all of these cities. I'm in St. Pete, Sarasota's unaffordable, Tampa's unaffordable, Largo's unaffordable. I don't understand how people can do it. And I talk about multiple things because I look at my apartment that I lived in just 4 years ago. The rent has almost doubled in that apartment. One of my friends from that city still lives in that apartment complex working the same job. How is the rent doubled? Who can afford it? Nobody. And it's like, you know, we really have to stand for something or fall for anything, because just because things have been happening for a long time does not make them right. And we have to start standing more on the side of justice, because people, you know, they deserve a right to live. You shouldn't be working and spending all of your money on housing. That was never intended. That's why just 4 or 5 years ago, the rent was half of what it was, because you should only be spending a small portion on your livelihood. People need to take walks. Everybody's depressed. They're on medications. They're down in the dumps. Like, they're not seeing any sun. They're just turning and burning, and they're exhausted, and something's got to give. Like, people really do need help. The funds are up. Like we were just saying, in March, $18 million for the relief of the housing crisis after COVID and everything. I mean, there's been a housing crisis before COVID, but COVID just exacerbated everything that's going on. And there was $18 million. Now there's $5 million or less since March. Like, everybody is suffering. From the housing crisis to the energy crisis, everybody is suffering. And people that need to listen really need to listen hard, because people are suffering. And I don't understand how we are the people that make the city move. So if everybody's homeless, how is the city gonna move? They always want development, but you're only gonna develop the people into the streets. And it's not making any sense. People can't afford food, people can't afford gas, people can't afford their light bills. I don't really know what people can afford, because honestly, I'm working day and night, and it's crazy. But thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, for sharing, your thoughts, important thoughts. Lastly, I'd like to highlight the lack of protection for tenants. This is something that we need to highlight right here in Florida. At the state level, there are no protection for tenants. And this trickles down to the city and the county level as well. There are no protections in the state of Florida for tenants. And that is something that needs to be addressed, and that is something that can be addressed right here by the City Commission right here in Sarasota. So to lay out our demands again, our main demands today for slumlord Richard Ellis is for him to do the right thing and to put Elena up in a hotel while he makes the necessary repairs and then returns her to her home at the same rate as before. And our demands for the city of Sarasota, for the City Commission of Sarasota, is to remove Richard Ellis as a special magistrate. The people deserve better than a negligent slumlord. If these are the decisions that he is making in private regarding his tenants, I can only imagine the decisions that he is making using the power of this office. And that is something that needs to stop. Now, we also demand that the City Commission passes ordinances and laws, protections for tenants. We demand the right to counsel. It has been proven in New York, 85% of tenants who were facing evictions, who had an attorney, were able to stay in their homes. There are many things that the city of Sarasota can do to alleviate the suffering of people during this crisis. The solution is not just to build more affordable housing. By the time we're done building houses, all the workers, working class people who have been displaced and who have had to move out of the state of Florida in order to survive. So we are also demanding the establishment of a landlord's registry, where the landlords have to register the properties, and then the city can publish every year the deficiencies and conditions that tenants have been subjected to by these landlords. We also demand the creation of a tenants advocacy office with actual power to take actions when landlords such as Richard Ellis refuse to do right by their tenants. We need an office that has actual power. We can also implement other things. Let me see, if we get a little creative, how about 60-day rent increase notice? That is something that does not exist right now that can very easily exist. 60 days will provide tenants with enough time to assess whether or not they can afford the rent increase. It'll allow tenants to assess whether or not they can afford the rent increase, but it will also give them the opportunity to find housing somewhere else if they cannot afford the rent increase. So this is something that the city can pass that will definitely alleviate. Here's another thing that we can do, which is the city can also pass ordinance. Banning discrimination against people that have housing vouchers. That will be something that can help people stay in their homes. Right now, landlords have the freedom to discriminate against people that have Section 8 vouchers and refuse to accept these vouchers when these vouchers literally represent money and rent that HUD pays on behalf of the tenant. And right now, landlords have the freedom to refuse those, putting, again, women, Black and brown people more at danger of the already existing institutionalized racism that exists regarding housing in our country. There are just a lot of things. Let's not buy into the mentality that building more housing is the only thing that can be done. Carla mentioned earlier rent control. If the city declares a state of emergency, then everyone, the residents, voters, will be able to vote on rent control in the ballot. Like you'll be able to go vote for this come November. This is something that's very doable and that cities can implement. So again, we are demanding that the city of Sarasota looks into solutions, into things that will alleviate the suffering of the people and that will help tenants stay in their home. Let's not forget that housing is a human right. Again, housing is a human right. Again, housing is a human right, and we are all entitled to safe, affordable housing. Thank you everyone for being here today.